She's been playing you this whole time. I told you she tried to entwine herself into your life.
Which one of you did this?
I see you.
I wanted to talk a little bit about one of the most appealing aspects of the film, which to me was the kind of winding, twisty narrative, right? Where like each scene you don't really know where it's going. I recently saw an interview with Zach Kreger, the director of Weapons and Barbarian, and he interestingly said that when he approaches movies, he doesn't really know where they're going scene from scene. He just kind of writes. And so I'm curious how your approach to writing a film like this and the predecessor goes. Do you have things mapped out and outlined, or yeah, just wondering if you could walk me through that a little bit.
Yeah, I typically know kind of the ins and outs of the general direction, but I think there's some fun to kind of leaving something to be explained. When I came into this one, I wrote that cold open with kind of the suicide and didn't know exactly what was going to cause that. I had some ideas of where we were going to take that, but for me, it was kind of fun to kind of build up this mystery. But for the most part, usually I kind of have kind of the beginning and the ending and kind of knowing where we're going to end up, but kind of having some fun. I think modern audiences have kind of seen everything, so they kind of know what to expect when you kind of leave a red herring or you kind of put a little clue into something, they're going to pick up on it pretty quickly. So for coming into making kind of movies in the modern age, you do kind of have to do a little bit of extra legwork in terms of understanding, kind of being even one step ahead of the kind of the expectation in an almost kind of like postmodern-y rock, paper, scissors, rock way.
No, I really like the way you put that. And you definitely have your finger on the pulse, I think, of the audience, because I think even the most like seasoned of moviegoer would find this movie to be very unpredictable. So obviously this movie, one of the things I really liked is that we get to expand our understanding of CW and her kind of capacity for good and evil. And kind of, yeah, both ends of that spectrum. What direction did you want to take CW in, and did you land on an understanding of her kind of finally being a villain, I guess?
Yeah, I think it is a kind of a backwards retribution arc in a fun way, a return. I think it was really fun for me coming into the sequel. What really clicked and made me want to kind of approach doing another one was that aspect of kind of seeing her living this kind of normal life in Europe and then seeing it kind of unfold and not knowing exactly where it fits in the grand schemes of the timeline. Um, so I think, but also I think her character is just so fun to kind of play with and see different sides of. And I think the first film we had kind of the initial kind of seeing exactly how she goes around her serial killer tendencies, but this one was kind of like expanding on that and seeing kind of a bigger scope of it.
Yeah, definitely. I love also the beginning of the film kind of plays after that cold open you mentioned, kind of plays like a false prequel. Like you kind of feel like you're watching a prequel and then you find out it's a sequel. And so that had me thinking, have you mapped out CW's kind of backstory and history and origins, or is that something that you would maybe like to explore one day?
Yeah, potentially. I think like Cass and I had a lot of conversations about kind of that history, and I think part of what is fun about kind of a character like this is kind of the enigmatic qualities of like you don't know exactly where they came from. I think we wanted to kind of tread the fine line and play with that a bunch, especially coming to the sequel, kind of making light of it and making light of kind of some of the ways that she's gone about doing certain things. Um, but I think, but yeah, like we've obviously had a lot of conversations, but we want to kind of keep it a bit in shadows of revealing just enough that you can kind of pull apart in your own perspective.
Yeah, that's a tricky balance because you don't want to reveal too much, right? And
Want
then,
to avoid
yeah.
want to avoid the Bond villain speech. Yeah.
Right, 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 exactly. And I think you definitely avoid that. I also wanted to ask you about Madison or Emily's character in the film and kind of her unexpected role in the film. I kind of went into this film cold, actually. I didn't even realize that she was going to be in the film. And so
Mhm.
I was kind of pleasantly surprised because she was the entry point of the first film. What made you want to bring her back into the story and insert her in a way where at first it seems like maybe she's going to be our protagonist before things kind of dial back a little bit?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it was fun to kind of explore the real life potential ramifications of a situation like this, of kind of what happens in the first film. I think um, I've seen that happen where something horrible happens and someone goes viral. I had a friend go viral, and then the entire internet just kind of jumped and just started criticizing and being like, I don't believe you. I don't like this is fake. And I think like seeing that and kind of seeing how if someone who comes back with several bodies, it's like what does that look like in a real world situation with how ruthless the internet can be. And I think that that was really fun to explore and seeing a very kind of evolved version of Madison and seeing kind of what she had become. And I think a lot of coming into the sequel is there's a lot of role reversals and kind of playing with switching things up in a way that structurally the movies are very similar, but they're in very different ways.
Yeah, they kind of invert one another in a
Yeah.
way that I found really interesting. Yeah, speaking of that point, I find it really interesting looking at the time that your last film came out and then this film came out, and just how much has changed in the
Yeah.
landscape of AI and like deepfake technology and red pill subculture, which I'd also like to talk to
Yeah.
you about. But in regards to the AI and the deepfake technology, was there a sense of urgency in telling this story that you wanted to make sure that it isn't I guess outdated before it
Old by the
finally hit?
time it comes out.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
that
Yeah.
happened with the first one. So when we wrote the first draft and when we shot the film, ChatGPT wasn't out, and I think by the time it came out, it was already like deepfakes and all things were becoming part of the kind of the cultural, the language. And I think so. It was pretty funny to see kind of how much things have evolved, even in the sense of like from when we premiered the film to when it was released, the first one. And so I think with this one, it was like looking. I look at more of the social and kind of like cultural
Mm.
ramifications as opposed to the tech. The tech kind of is second base to me. Um, so for me coming into this one, it's like looking at what's kind of around the corner. What are some of the uses that could be potentially problematic, or we'll kind of see what kind of happens. But I think like some of the stuff that we explore in the second one is already starting to happen. So it is kind of a weird kind of guessing game. But ultimately, for me, it's more about the character and their journey as opposed to how the tech works.
Yeah, and I think you do well in kind of using the tech as a vehicle to showcase those societal changes. Um, I don't know if you've heard of a movie called Apopheniacs that came out
Oh, yeah.
earlier this year. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I've seen some interviews with those filmmakers and found it interesting to hear their stance on whether or not they see that film as like anti-AI or like anti-deepfake. Do you see influencers as a stance on that?
I think it's more about like I was saying, it's like it's more about the potential social problems that we face as a culture. I think we like ran into social media in general without really thinking about the potential consequences. And then now we're seeing kind of the youth have these all these anxiety issues and all these kind of depression problems. And so I think for me, technology is it's going to come, and I think it's about how we deal with it. I am obviously as an artist pretty anti-AI use in terms of art. And I'm taking a stronger stance as time goes on. I think both these movies kind of feel a little bit of that way, but I think in terms of the films, it's more about just kind of the issues that we're probably going to face that are kind of the residual aspects of this of how we're going to use this technology, not necessarily saying technology is bad because
Mm,
technology is inevitable. It's
right.
what is our relationship with these things and how do we kind of have a healthy way without kind of losing ourselves. And I think we have a lot of kind of existential questions to answer in the coming decade.
No, definitely. I think we do. And I like how your film doesn't kind of preach to the audience, but still has that commentary. And so I did want to ask you about another side of the commentary, which is different in this film compared to the last one, which is the kind of Andrew Tate, red pill
Yeah.
subculture through the inclusion of that character. Tell me what inspired you to kind of weave that into the film, because that was an element that wasn't present last time
Mhm.
around.
So obviously, I mean, it's very prevalent that we're seeing kind of the rise of these kind of voices. And I think for me, just my own perspective, I think you can't really judge the preachers. I think you got to look at like why is the audience becoming so popular?
Mm,
And so when you're looking at these young men that are kind of gravitating towards these voices, that's something that needs to be explored on a bigger level. And I think with a character like Jacob, it's almost like he's a bit of a victim of his own audience, and I think you look at like him talking to his Cameron or looking at his relationship. Um, a big thing that John and I talked about was that kind of audience capture concept where you become a bit of a slave to what works
Mm.
online, and the way that you kind of have this feedback loop with your audience that wants to hear more of this topic or this perspective. And I think that to me is really fun to explore and kind of dive into and kind of see the extreme side of him as in his introduction, and then slowly kind of pull that back and see how did we get here.
No, I found that really fascinating where your entry point into that character clues you in that he's going to be one thing, and then as
Yeah.
each scene goes by, it unravels more.
Learn a
I
little
think I
bit
have time
more.
for one more question. So I did want to ask about the big kind of climactic fight at the end,
Mhm.
because I took that as like this kind of beautiful microcosm of the film itself, right? Like the fight takes twists, turns, you don't know who's going to come out on top, and that really is like kind of the film overall, or at least my experience with the film overall. What was that like to choreograph and to film? And was there
Mhm.
any part of that that ended up different compared to what was originally planned for that fight?
Mm. Yeah. So I think that's a fun question because I think on the first film in our finale, we did have a fight planned. We had a kind of a choreographed plan of how we wanted to kind of build up this finale in the first film. And with weather and logistics and the fact that we were just a very small film, we just weren't able to really pull it off. And so coming into this one, we had a stunt coordinator, Kirk, and we had stunt doubles, and we were able to kind of do like fight rehearsals in Vancouver before we went to Bali and had 5 days to actually shoot the scene in that house. So I think coming into this, it was really special to be able to kind of pull off what we really wanted to pull off with the first film, but we just didn't have the resources or time. Um, and I think as it evolves, it was really fun to kind of look at the environment that we were in and kind of build a fight based around that. So there was a lot of us figuring it out kind of as we got there and kind of being like, oh, there's a pool table. Let's get some fake pool balls and have some fun with that. And I think that was a real testament to our stunt coordinator and kind of our team of just kind of throwing ideas in. So that was really fun to kind of build up this finale that we've been waiting for since the first film.